Oklahoma Sooners are heading to Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio, welcoming the Cincinnati Bearcats to the Big 12 as they are in their farewell tour with the Big 12. And this is going to be a game that is going to be on a lot of people's minds. A lot of people are going to watch it. And it's not only because Oklahoma's on their way out, but because Cincinnati's on their way in, and the Big 12 is really searching for the new leaders that are going to lead this conference as Oklahoma and Texas are exiting. And as you guys have watched this show and you guys have watched me talk about Cincinnati over this offseason and recently just into the season, you guys know that the Cincinnati game, I've definitely put a question mark next to, asking the question, is this going to be the game where Oklahoma slips up, or is this going to be the game where Oklahoma shows us something different that we haven't seen in the past? And I want to go ahead and dive into a little bit about that today, because I want to give you guys exactly what my thoughts are around this game and what I want to see, but additionally, what's going to happen? Like, how's Oklahoma supposed to win this game? And if you go and you look at the matchup history against Cincinnati, it's only been Oklahoma versus Cincinnati twice. You had a home-and-home series. You had Oklahoma play once in 2008 in Norman. This was the year that Oklahoma went to the national championship, and Oklahoma completely shellacked the Bearcats at home, 52-26. And then in 2010, you saw Oklahoma make that return trip to Cincinnati, Ohio, and they only ended up winning that game 31-29. And so there's not a lot of history to go off here with this game. But you look at what Oklahoma needs to do in this game, and there's really a couple things that you look at and say, you need to see Oklahoma improve in these areas, or really just play well in these areas. One, you want to see the secondary play better than they have. So last week against Tulsa, you saw some of the secondary give up big plays. And you've seen that, I'm not going to say big plays, but you saw Tulsa get some passing yards. And you just want to see the secondary shore that up a little bit. And I know it's funny to say that because there were a lot of interceptions. I think the secondary themselves had 3 interceptions last week. So it's funny to say that, hey, the secondary needs to shore themselves up a little bit. And we even talked about this on Ty's show over at the Round the Table Sports yesterday. But I think it's a lot easier for the offense to get passing yards against the defense than it is rushing yards. I just feel like it's easier to have better athletes and better skilled guys at the wide receiver position than it is at the running back position. And that might just be because wide receivers at this point are just more talented. That position is more talented at this point. But, I mean, it doesn't matter how good your secondary is, you're going to give up at least some amount of passing yards. I think primarily good passing defenses, you see somewhere in the realm of 170 to 200. And if you have a really good passing defense, you're maybe in the 150 to 155 range. But I don't really feel like that's really that common nowadays. So I just want to see the secondary really build off the game that they had last week in terms of being able to create turnovers. But also, I would like to see the Cincinnati passing game to be held under 200, so 200 or less. And the reason why that is they're averaging 220.7 passing yards a game. Not to mention, I don't really feel like they have really anybody that's going to be super. I mean, I don't feel like they have anybody that's going to be a really super threat for you in terms of their receiving game. You have Xavier Henderson, who this season has doubled the amount of receptions as their next leading receiver at 20 receptions, 299 yards, averaging about 14.9 yards catch. But then you have Braden Smith, who, only 10 receptions for 168, but he has a higher average at 16.8. So if you're Oklahoma, you just want to be able to defend well. You want to be able to keep, how I look at it is, doesn't matter necessarily. I mean, yes, you don't want to see a 52 to 51 game, but you want to see this defense primarily keep everybody under their averages, scoring average, point or yards average, whether it's through the air or through the ground game. And that's what you want to see. And that's how you want to be able to analyze the defense for Oklahoma. So I look at it and say, hey, you need to allow 200 or less. I know they're Opponent's pass yard is 220. But if I can see Oklahoma do 200 or less, you're doing really good there. And they're not too far off. I mean, Oklahoma is only allowing right now as it sits 217.3 yards in the pass game per game. So something for Oklahoma to look at there. You also want to see your defensive line continue to build throughout this game. Oklahoma's only allowed literally 80 rush yards a game. And you've really seen the effects of this, especially in the pass game, because you've seen them, they're not getting a ton of sacks, but they are creating enough pressure on the quarterback to make him flush him out of the pocket, but they contain him. And with Emory Jones, that's going to be important. Can you contain Emory Jones in the rush game? Cincinnati is averaging 239.3 rushing yards. 293.3 rushing yards a game. You want to be able to see Oklahoma really be able to keep him contained, but then also slow down their running game outside of Emory Jones, which their leading running back is Corey Keener. Now, if you shut down Emory Jones a little bit, who has 40 carries for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns, who is, by the way, the second leading rusher on the team behind Keener. I hope I'm saying that right. Then their rushing game probably won't be as effective as it shows on the stat sheet. And by the way, I got Cincinnati's passing yards per game wrong. They actually averaged 294.7. They only allow 220.7 a game. So I got that wrong. But the key in this game is to keep Emory Jones at bay. And the reason why I say that is when you go and you look at Oklahoma in the past and you look at what they've done against similar quarterbacks, and I know what they did against Emory Jones in the Cotton Bowl in 2020. Guys, that was in 2020. We need to look ahead at where we're at now and what Emory Jones has done in his career. Because when you look at what Emory Jones has done in his career, in 2023, so far he's had 735 yards. Or no, that's passing. I'm sorry. I'm looking at passing yards. That'd be impressive if he had that many rushing yards. 2023, he's had 144 rushing yards so far. Last year, he had that injury. He only had 31, so you can kind of scrap last season. 2021, when he was still at Florida, 759 yards. That was his best season to date. 2020, he had 217 rushing yards. 2019, he had 256. And then obviously in 2018, where he didn't see a whole lot of action, he still only had 41. So you take out 2018 and 2022, Emory Jones is a viable attack to take you out in the run game. And this is a quarterback that in the past, Oklahoma has struggled with. You look at the Adrian Martinez's of the world. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at it and saying, if Oklahoma can show me that they are able to still contain a mobile quarterback like Emory Jones, you feel good about where Oklahoma is going to go this season. And I know you're not really going to see a ton of mobile quarterbacks this season. You're going to have Jalen Daniels at Kansas. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to kill you with his legs. You're going to have TCU. They're going to try to kill you with their legs. But there's not a lot of teams out there that are going to run all over you in terms of their quarterback. So this is one of your few opportunities to show me this season that this is an area that you've improved on. And I think a lot of Oklahoma fans, you guys will agree with me on that. You just want to see Oklahoma take care of business with the quarterback run game. And so far, this defensive line, they have shown that they're up to the task at keeping a team like Cincinnati at bay. The question is, will they be able to do it? So, again, keep them under 200 passing yards. You look at their rushing yards, they're averaging 239. Keep them at 100 or less, right? This is the same thing with SMU. I want to see you keep I think with SMU, I said 350. I think SMU's got a better offense than Cincinnati. That's just proven historically. So I want to see you keep Cincinnati 300 yards or less in this game. Now, if Oklahoma gives up like 315, 320, probably not freaking out. because you just gave up a little bit more. I just don't want to see a 400-plus yard game from Oklahoma on the defensive side of the ball. This is a team where you should be able to go and you should be able to keep them at bay pretty easily. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, you really want to see the offense continue to click here. Cincinnati, they've defended against the rushing game pretty well. 109.7 rushing yards is what they've allowed. We know that Jeff Lebby has tried to establish a run game with Tawi Walker and Marcus Major. Now, a lot of that, Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes recovering from injuries. So you really wanted to see what you had in options 3 and 4 to see if maybe they could step up to the challenge and challenge Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes for 1A and 1B, right? I want to see Oklahoma go out here and get 170-plus rushing yards in this game. I want to see these running backs not be stopped by this Cincinnati defensive line that everybody's talked about. Everybody's talked about the Cincinnati defensive line and how they're actually a pretty good defensive line and maybe even one of the better ones you'll see this season. I want to see Oklahoma go out there and smash that narrative. I want them to run up and down this defensive line. I want them to beat them up. Same thing, offensive line for Oklahoma needs to be dominant against this defensive line. I think we've talked about it with Jay over at Unfair Sports, where he's saying this might be one of the better offensive lines Oklahoma's had in a while. Well, if that's the case, then they should be able to go out here and they should be able to dominate a team like Cincinnati in the passing game and the run game. So the only other thing that I really want to see from Oklahoma is the penalties. You got to clean up the penalties. And the reason why I think that is so important, you haven't had a game where you haven't given up 7 or more penalties. Now, you're heading into the Big 12 play, and I think a lot of Oklahoma fans will tell you, hey, the Big 12 is going to be against us this year. The calls won't be in our favor. Okay. If that's the case, that means you have to do everything in your power to limit your penalties. You have to do everything in your power to play as clean of a game as possible. Meaning, if this is one of the better offensive lines that you've had, you don't need any stupid false start penalties. If you're on the defensive side of the ball, I don't want to see any pass interference calls. Turn around, look at the ball. It's that, I feel like it's that simple. I guess I didn't play football, and I didn't play in any of those two positions, obviously, so maybe I just don't understand it. But if you can eliminate those two penalties, which I feel like are the ones that have been hurting Oklahoma the most this season, then you feel really good about this team coming out of Cincinnati, going back home to play Iowa State, going to play Texas as a 5-0 team going into the Red River game, which, by the way, if Oklahoma and Texas can take care of business and both be undefeated in that game, 1, that's top 10 matchup. 2, College game day and big noon kickoff are probably there. So Oklahoma has an opportunity going into their first conference game to make a statement here. Dillon Gabriel can continue to make his case that he is a Heisman contending quarterback. Because I think you've seen a lot of that conversation start to potentially come up after week 3. Dillon Gabriel, who's 66 of 80, 905 yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. Dillon Gabriel is being as accurate as possible. Dillon Gabriel is showing us that he's improved as a pocket passing quarterback. So Dillon Gabriel going in to play a team like Cincinnati, where although they're not a world beater, Cincinnati is a team that is formidable enough to be able to go in there and stop you and cause you problems. And if you go in there and you slice up this defense, you could really start to make yourself a case. Now, Dillon Gabriel still has to look good against some of his more formidable opponents too, like a Texas. TCU at the end of the season is still going to be there. And then if Oklahoma makes it to the Big 12 championship game, which I think at this point, a lot of people are expecting them to because you're 3-0, and this isn't the 3-0 that we saw last year where you were coming off Nebraska and you lost to K-State. This isn't that team. This is a team that is very capable of getting to the Big 12 championship because they just look different. You see it on the defensive side of the ball where they're deeper, especially on the defensive line. Because you haven't seen a whole lot, or you haven't really heard a whole lot of Reggie Grimes, who I think by the third game of last season, by the end of that game, had 5.5 sacks, if I remember correctly. He's still there. He's still just as good as he was last year. The problem is you brought in guys like Rondell Bothroyd, Trace Ford, DeJoun Terry. You brought in more depth on this defensive line. And if you've noticed, when you watch the games, they're constantly rotating those guys out, trying to keep their legs fresh and keep these guys as fresh and healthy as possible, especially going into conference play, especially going into the Texas game. So my prediction here for Oklahoma is as simple as this: 42-20. I don't feel like Oklahoma is going to put up 50-plus points this game. I respect Cincinnati's defense enough, at least. But I also respect Cincinnati's offense a little bit to go out there and score against us. Now, I don't expect Oklahoma to give up more than 20 points. I expect them to keep Cincinnati 20 points or less. And the spread on this game is only 14 points. So I'm picking Oklahoma to cover and cover well. A 22-point game, that you would call a great win against a team like Cincinnati. A team that, when Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12, probably will be a top 3 team in this conference year in and year out. So, guys, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what y'all's thoughts are. Jump down in the comments below. Give me your predictions of what you guys think Oklahoma is going to be able to do in this game. And additionally, if you have not already, go ahead, like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Google, Apple, or Spotify, give me 5 stars. Leave me a review. Jump over to Twitter. Tweet at me. Go find my thread. Drop your score predictions over there. Love to have you guys be a part of what we're doing. Appreciate you guys watching as usual. And until next time, Boomer.